Shabbat Shalom, everyone. And thank you for all of your kind words. Sometimes like this when you have prepared something to say and then you forget everything that you're supposed to say. So let's go through a sermon together and we'll see what happens. But thank you so much. We are just so happy and so thrilled to include this community as our family and celebrating together. So we appreciate it from the bottom of our hearts. So thank you. So it's a important and a powerful day after what has been a pretty good week for me. But I want to talk about something this morning that's a little bit serious, so I hope that I can have your attention and that we can have a fair discussion together. So I want to start by telling a couple of different stories. When I was working at Hillel at Columbia and Barnard for the last 2 years, I had a student, and we'll call him Ben. And Ben was a freshman my first year working. And he was the sweetest kid you could possibly imagine. He had a heart of pure gold. And as an aside, he was just such a great old soul. His roommates told me that he would wake up every morning at 6 o'clock, and he would put on his bathrobe and his slippers. And then he would go and he would get the paper and make himself a cup of coffee, and he would go through with a highlighter and highlight different parts of the newspaper he liked, all while getting a UV scalp treatment for his already thinning hair. So this was a 19-year-old who was going through this, but he was just a really great kid. He was absolutely fantastic. And he was coming to services every single week, and we loved seeing him. He always had a big smile on his face. So my board said, we have to get him involved more. He's such a great personality. We need to be able to talk to him. We need to get him to bring him in. Maybe he could be a gabbai. Maybe he could be helping read Torah. And they approached him in a pretty public setting right after services on a Friday night. And they asked him if he would be willing to be a gabbai. And I saw tears start to form in his eyes. And I thought first, my initial reaction was that he was just so honored and so happy. But then he went into the hallway, and he was just breaking down. So I went out into the hallway and talked with him, and the first thing he said to me is that he felt like he had led people astray. He felt that he had somehow been a fraud, that even though he was going to services every single week and that he loved going to services, he was born and raised in the conservative movement just north of New York City in Westchester, that he had had a Hebrew school education, that he went to synagogue growing up. But he said, I'm not comfortable reading Torah. I'm not comfortable reading Hebrew. I don't feel good here. I feel like I've just been faking it my entire life. So before I finish the rest of this story, I want to ask a couple of personal questions. And I know this isn't an easy conversation to have, but I think it's an important one that we can have together. So I'm not going to make anyone participate, but just as a show of hands, I want to know if there's anyone here who's ever felt that way, that they felt that their Hebrew wasn't good enough. Let's see hands for anyone who has thought that they've been lost in a service ever. Maybe hands for people who continue to be lost in a service. Seth and Charlie? You got a really great teacher every single week. I don't want to see those hands. Maybe put our hands up if we felt that we have felt that we have been judged because of our observance level or our knowledge of ritual and tradition. And most importantly, if we've ever been too scared or too embarrassed to ask for help, to ask for assistance, to ask for translations. So I hope that everyone looked around the room when this was happening. And before I finish with Mark's story, I want to be able to share another story. This is a story that happened to me personally. My first year in college, I was singing in our choir. And we were taking an international trip to Africa, where we were singing in Tanzania and in Kenya. And at the beginning of our trip, we were scheduled to be singing at a community center in Dar es Salaam, which is a big city in Tanzania. And because there's so much going on in the city and they don't have a great electric infrastructure, there are brownouts that happen all the time in the city. So for hours at a time, there will just be big sections of the city that are just completely without power and electricity. So we were supposed to show up at this venue, but there had been a brownout all day. So we figured our concert was canceled, but nonetheless, we got dressed, we put on our choir robes, and we got on the bus. And when we arrived, our choir director said, I'm going to get out, I'm going to look and just see how many people are here. Maybe if there are 4 or 5 people, we can invite them on the bus, and it might be a nice thing if we can just sing together on the bus. So we said, okay. And he walked into this dark building, and he came back on the bus with a very serious expression on his face. And he said, ladies and gentlemen, let's go, we have to sing. So we walked into this building expecting to see 5, 10 people, and there were probably 300 or 400 people in that building with flashlights and candles, sitting and waiting for us to sing, and they had been there for over an hour. So we got up on stage, already very emotional, and we looked at one another as best we could over candlelight. And then just when we were about to start, the lights went up, and we started to sing. And we were looking at our conductor, and it was a great first couple of songs were just beautiful. And after our first song ended, all the lights went out again. And this time, no one lit a candle. No one lit their flashlight. We couldn't see one another. We couldn't see our director. We couldn't see anyone in the audience. But every single one of us, 72 members of that choir, held each other's hands, and we continued to go through our entire repertoire for an hour, stopping when we were supposed to stop, starting in the right pitch. We would have people help us. If we were going in getting flat or sharp, someone who had perfect pitch would get us back so that we were singing the right way. We just knew, and we were squeezing each other's hands at different points to say, this is when we finish, this is when we start. And there was something that was going on in that pitch blackness where we couldn't see one another. And right when we finished, a couple of minutes, there was just silence. And then the lights came back on. And suffice to say, there was not a dry eye in that entire building. We were crying, our director was crying, everyone in the audience was crying. And then we stayed there and we sang for another hour with them, and we just had an amazing experience. So why am I bringing in these 2 different stories today? Because today is an exceptional day. Every single day is exceptional in its own way, but today our Torah reading is so meaningful and so profound that I figured I had to say something about this, because today we celebrate Matan Torah. Today we celebrate the gift of Torah, that we receive something that is so powerful and that has made our community and has shaped our identity for thousands of years. But let us not mistake what this is. Let us not mistake what Matan Torah is, what our inheritance is by getting the gift of Torah. There are 2 different ways of receiving Torah. The Israelites received the Torah from Moses, who comes down with words from God, but Moses is being the messenger after receiving his own Torah. And I would like to argue that the Torah that he receives happens much earlier than Sinai. The Torah that Moses receives is at the beginning of our parasha, in Parashat Yitro, where it says that they have now been entered into the wilderness, entered into the desert, and Moses sits from morning until evening judging. Every single one of these Israelites are coming and looking for answers and looking for responses, and Moses all day talks to them one by one by one until his father-in-law comes and rests his hand on his tired shoulder and says to him, you can't do it alone. You can't do this by yourself. We know that you're here for us. We're here for you. This is when Moses receives Torah. This is a very different kind of Torah. And what I'd like to share this morning is that the inheritance of Torah is one thing, that we can receive the written Torah, a Torah that we can study together, a Torah that we can learn together, a Torah that can shape and make our lives powerful and meaningful. But the true Torah, the Matan Torah, the gift of Torah that we receive, our birthright of Torah, is the hand that holds ours in the dark. Our inheritance of Torah is one another. That every single one of us represents the receiving of Torah every single day, that we make a conscious decision to say, I am me, but I need help. I have people that I love, I have people that I care about, and it is those people that I surround myself with, the people that are meaningful in my life, that make me better. And it is an obligation that we have to ourselves and to one another as a Jewish people. We have a written Torah, but we have a Torah that is much bigger as well. So I'd like to make a promise to you all today that after seeing all of these hands coming up, that the next time I give a sermon, or any time I give a sermon after this day, if I forget to translate something, if you're confused, if I have said something that is confusing and I haven't done anything to make you feel more comfortable, put your hand up and let's talk, because we're in this together. And I also want to invite you, as part of my promise, and a promise that I guarantee you that Rabbi Starr and Chazan Propus and Assistant Cantor Gutman and anyone around can make the same promise, is that there is no silly questions, there are no stupid questions, that we have opportunities for learning that happen Thursdays, and Shabbat mornings, and Sunday mornings, and all different times during the week. And we also have some really comfortable offices. If you ever want to make a time and sit down and have a cup of coffee and just ask questions, that's what we're here for as well. And I also will make a promise to you, Seth and Charlie, and I've made a promise to you guys before, that if you guys ever have a question, regardless of what it is, I'm always going to be here to be able to hopefully answer, though I can't promise that I will know the answers either. But you see all the arms that were going up this morning? We're going to do our best to make sure that you don't feel that way, okay? That's my promise to you. So my blessing to you all on this Shabbat morning is that we embrace this idea of Matan Torah, of the gift of Torah, in the different ways that we really hold on to that idea, that concept. That yes, we have a physical Torah and we have a Torah of text, but most importantly, that we have a Torah that is one another. On this Shabbat, may you embrace that Torah. May every single day of your lives be a reaffirmation of that Torah. And may we be each other's hands in the dark, looking for one another. Shabbat Shalom. Can I finish the story of Ben? I realize it. Poor Ben. I'm sorry, that totally slipped my mind.
Did I mention he got engaged this week?
I've got things going on in here, I'm sorry. So Ben and I went and had coffee, and we sat down and we talked for 2-3 hours about how the two of us can work together to get him more involved in the community. So we spent time together every single week, learning how to be a Gabbai first, to be able to go through the Hebrew, to be able to say the different blessings that we say up at the Shulchan. Then we went through services. I made him some recordings, and he learned how to lead services, first starting with Friday night services and then Shabbat morning. Last year, I wrote him a recommendation as a person of reference so he could go to a summer yeshiva. And I am thrilled to say that in a year or 2 years, when he asks if I can write his letter of recommendation for when he applies to rabbinical school, I'd be thrilled to do that as well. So that is the rest of the story. I will keep you updated as well. So thank you.